You are listening to another episode of the Liberti Stories Podcast. This is a podcast where we have space to share stories from the life of our church and for us to get to know those stories better together. If you have more questions about our church, please visit us at www.libertywithani.harrisburg.org. That's libertywithani.harrisburg.org for more information. Welcome back to another episode of the Liberti Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Wright, and today I am joined by my fellow Dominican Republic travelers, Greg and Jen Lowe. Welcome to our beautiful podcast studio. How are you doing today, Lowe's?
Doing well. Nice to be here.
Yes, first time in the new studio.
New studio. Yeah, if only it were new. But you know, we were joking about our studio being first world problems before getting on the air. So, so today we wanted to use this Stories podcast to give an update on the trip that we took to the Dominican Republic back in November. What was the point of that? What did we learn? And what is Liberti doing now following that trip and pursuing a partnership in the Dominican Republic? So first things first, though, who are Greg and Jen Lowe? So who are you and what roles do you serve in here at Liberti?
I will start. We have been coming to the church for about 11 years, pretty close to the beginning. And we currently both serve as deacons here. I also help lead a Bible study.
Yeah, you just came off a Bible study, actually.
Just hot off the
press, guys.
Hot off the press. Those are two main roles. Other than that, I just enjoy getting to know people of all ages and serve them and love them, and especially young moms, and that's what I love to do.
And who's Greg?
And my name is Greg, as you already know, and I serve on the deacons as well. Jen and I served for 6 years on the deacons, and then took the sabbatical in between, and then came back on in July 1st of last year. I serve as the lead deacon, so my job is to represent the deacons and mercy activities and opportunities to the leadership team, which is comprised of yourself, Jenna, and Matt, and Bob. And we meet every other week. And so my job is to try to make sure there's coordination between the mercy efforts that are going on in the church, and hear also about things coming that might provide mercy opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's what I currently do.
Cool. Yeah, and I think the two of you are both very hands-on people, and I think one of the things I've appreciated about you the most is bringing other people along with you as you do things. I think you are examples of that really well, and that's actually what makes you really good deacons too, is mercy and pulling people along with you. And I got to see a new dimension of that on the trip that we got to go on to the Dominican Republic. So for the people listening at home, what was the purpose of our trip to go to the DR in November? Would one of you like to tackle that?
Yeah, I can do that. We partnered with Live Global to go down and investigate a variety of different ministries that were happening in the Dominican Republic, some to Dominicans, some to Haitians that find themselves as very much aliens in the Dominican Republic. And so there were all kinds of different ministries that we went and visited and spent time with. One was, I won't list them all now, but one of them was an agricultural ministry where a farm was being put together to provide local produce and jobs for people in the Dominican. One was a for-profit business. It was a print shop and sort of a little technology repair center, sort of a deal for the same purposes. One was an orphanage, or a place where orphans were taken in and then put in a school setting to learn. And that particular project aspired to have a larger school and even for-profit businesses like restaurants that would be partnering with the
and
school
even like
itself.
Trade development stuff.
Yep. And some trade and vocational training that would take place on the upper floor of this building that they hope to build. And then we went to places of just extreme need, like Abate, which is a sugarcane harvesting village that's done with pretty much manual labor. That would be a separate side topic as to why the United States decided not to buy sugarcane from the Dominican Republic anymore, because of the labor practices that were used there. But we continued on and met other ministries that had sort of a neighborhood feel ministry that was providing a lot of programming to help people that were living in developments that we visited. But we ended up visiting, and this might be a good transition to Ishmael and his family.
Yeah.
And he was doing a variety of things all in and around, not too far from Santiago, not too far from Santo Domingo, which is the capital. And that's where our focus took us, which we'll probably get into in a little bit here. But so the purpose was really just to meet with these folks, see what was going on, evaluate the need, as well as evaluate our church's capacity to help and find out where would there be a good match. And some of them already had significant help from a variety of other partners, and some of them had less. And so we focused on the ones that had a greater need.
Yeah, and for us and for kind of some background information, our global missions team had been praying for 2 years that the Lord would open up a survey type trip like this one, where we could see several ministries and explore just that, the type of ministry where we could actually have a maybe a more long-term relationship with a national leader in their own context. And in this case, we're going to be talking about Ishmael Dora in a second. He's Haitian born, also a U.S. citizen, but is ministering to Haitians in the Dominican Republic because of the situation in Haiti, which is a whole nother side discussion as well. There's so many rabbit trails that we could take on this conversation. Before we get to Ishmael and that partnership and the GMT's desire to see that grow over time, could you guys maybe just share maybe one highlight from the trip that we took to the DR?
Sure. As I think back, I don't know if it's particularly one story, but I think it was taking, seeing a lot of very hard situations and despair, which I've been to Haiti before, so it was not necessarily new.
Yeah.
But it could be an overwhelming lack of hope as you're seeing these things.
Yep.
And I was really struck by, generally, there were several women that were teachers. And just as they pour into the lives of children, and I think the children are the things that stand out the most, and what gives a sense of hope of what can be in the future. So there was one community that we were in where there was a woman who had sacrificed years and years of her life to educate children in a very small, very small room. Multiple grade levels, and that was really her life's work. And then even as we'll see in Ismail's case with the church and school that they have going, just the hope in the future of the lives of these kids and the people that are just teaching them the gospel, but also just teaching them skills that they can use.
Yeah, when circumstantially it doesn't look like there's a lot of hope, the people of God are standing in that gap and working. And which is encouraging and challenging, I think, to me, and it was challenging for you guys, but also ideally through partnership like this one, it challenges the hearts of Liberty in general to be people of mercy and to come alongside of people that are doing mercy in immensely dark and hard contexts. I do want to kind of transition from what was like a highlight to what is exciting the two of you about what God is doing, what the kingdom work that's happening in the DR. What has this trip done to excite the Lowe family for what God's doing down there?
Yeah, I guess I would probably address that question by thinking back to a quote that Matt has used a couple of times over the last 11 years in sermons. I think I recall him using it twice, but the quote was about that anybody who thinks there's not a God of justice, who's not upset with injustice, that's sort of a belief that's formed in the suburbs. That it takes a quiet suburb to come to a position like that. I'm obviously grossly paraphrasing the exact quote, but I hear people in the United States say all the time, well, we have poor here. And you don't have to drive too far to find them. And you can stop out at the red light right in front of Liberty Church here and find somebody that's probably not doing really well. But to be in another place and Jen and I had been on other mission trips, Jen to Haiti, myself to Mexico, in other settings, just away from this culture. It was a great moment to not hear about the U.S. election for a little while last year when we happened to be there. But to be in that context, I mean, it can't be accomplished via podcast. It cannot be accomplished via pictures, even audio, and even just video. Versus sitting with these people across the table from them as we're sitting with you here, to see the actual challenges that they face.
Yeah.
And there's just so many nuances to the challenges that they face. So a highlight for me would be, I don't know, just being arm's length, would be being personal to those things versus reading and watching and listening to other sorts of things. I mean, everybody knows that these situations do exist, but being there just has a dynamic. Maybe I'm exposing my generational bias against social media and podcasts as being as definitive as in-person contacts, but that's a long-winded way to say it's almost impossible to describe without being there. And for me, that was it helped me answer the question, what is real? And what is real in the world? What is the extent of the need in the world? And reminded me all over again from harkening back to other trips that I had been on, what is real?
Yeah.
So that to me is a highlight because it's hard in our culture with the way our media sort of comes at us, and even the comforts of our own lives tend to encircle us, to be able to have a clear answer to that question, what is real? So that was helpful for me.
Yeah, and I think that's it's easy for when we think about like a global partnership with someone, it's easy for that to feel distant when you don't have personal experiences, when there isn't an actual people or persons or a group in mind that is that you can't touch, you can't feel, you can't experience the despair, but also the hope in tandem with one another. All of those things change our hearts and make us excited about partnering in those spaces, right? So since our trip in the DR, a lot of people have asked us three questions of like, what are we doing? And the reality is Liberti, our global missions team, our deacons, our elders, even like me and my weird, like I'm on staff team and like the GMT, we have actually been taking meetings, and we've been having like decision-making discussions behind the scenes, and unequivocally, everyone's really excited about what God is doing in the DR. And so that brings me to, let's talk about Ishmael and his wife Amanya for a second. So could you guys just briefly for us just provide a picture of who Ishmael and Amanya Dora are, and why Liberti has decided to move forward with a global partnership with them?
So you hit it a little bit in your introduction to them. Ishmael's from Haiti, as is his wife, and they came to the United States for their education and became U.S. citizens, and then decided as a couple to return to minister to their people, but are unable to do that in Haiti. So they ended up finding, well, gosh, there's 500,000 at least of our people in the Dominican Republic.
There's probably more.
Probably somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million. That have fled there literally for their lives. And I think everybody probably listening to this understands that the situation in Haiti is fairly dire, and that's why people would flee for their lives.
I mean, for context, when we were on the ground in the DR, an American plane was shot at in Haiti.
Yeah, landing in Port-au-Prince, a Spirit Airlines plane was fired on. Now, it wasn't necessarily like a military strike, but still, people were shooting at planes trying to land.
So just for some context, that was the news alert that I got on my phone in the DR when we were running around. So. Yeah.
So the reason we gravitated towards Ishmael and his family was a couple of reasons. Number one was the match with our congregation, which I'll get to in a second. And number two was the need that they had, and that also has to do with the match. So Ishmael is theologically trained. Ishmael has his doctorate. He has advanced degrees in Old Testament studies. He's fluent in English. He's probably half fluent in Spanish, and he's 100% fluent in Creole, which is a very necessary thing.
And he has a THM in Greek.
Yes. Yeah. So a very well-educated person. So he and his wife are both fluent in English, as are all of his children.
Mm-hmm.
So the needs that were expressed to us as we met with him were a couple. Number one was theological training, because he's gathering rural pastors and people from literally the countryside that are driving, some of them an hour or two or three on either bicycles or motorcycles, or finding some way to get there to provide theological training.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of sort of a Wayne Grudem, systematic theology, chapter at a time, the doctrine of grace, the doctrine of, et cetera, and working through that with them to provide training, because many of them don't have it.
Yeah.
He's also preaching and teaching in a local church context, in a church that he has started in a predominantly Haitian
that's only 2 years old.
Neighborhood. 30 or 40 kids already established in a school there. And so he's providing Sunday school instruction. He's providing an actual a sermon on each Sunday. And then there's additional training that takes place to members of the congregation on topics. The one that he has on his heart most recently, that as he and I were on the phone not long ago, was just the topic of marriage. Because many of these Haitians have come and they have children together, but they are not legally married. Just like not time in the schedule to do that when you're fleeing for your life. And then just, now we live together and we have these children. So he has a burden to see instruction on marriage and marriage relationships. That happens to be something on his mind.
Yeah.
So there's that, as well as there's a significant amount of physical need and assistance. And he's we think, created that in a constructive way to be in the context of the church. So he's just not out passing out aid to random persons, people that have become established in a part of the church and are bringing their children to the school. He's sort of centering the aid through there to have there be a connection with the church and the school and this aid. And I mean aid like in the form of toothpaste and toothbrushes and towels
or even
food.
just providing meals for the kiddos every day at school.
And the school does provide one meal. In many cases, that's the children's main meal is the one that they get at the school.
Yeah.
And then lastly, our group, I think, as you and I and Jen discussed this when we were having our sort of separate meetings, that
our Liberty powwows.
Yeah, just our Liberty powwows, because we were there with like 6 other churches, that some family care would go a long way to blessing Ismail and his family.
Gospel
because
friendship.
They have 4 children that are being homeschooled. In addition, Ismail's mother lives with them.
Yeah.
So here's a family of 7 homeschooling their children. And so to coming alongside this family in just practical ways to help them in the chores around their home, to help in this homeschooling process with their children, to just be with the children, to hang out with the children while Ismail and his wife maybe have their first time out by themselves
in literally 2 years
for a date would be a great blessing to them.
Yeah.
They're not asking to do that every night or even once a week, but I don't think once a year is too much for them to plan for.
Yeah.
In that context. So long-winded way to say teaching, the assistance and mercy ministry for caring for these families that are coming to church and school, and then family care for Ismail and his family. We just thought that was a good match for teams that we could put together from Liberty to go down on a continual basis.
Yeah. And I think that kind of tethered to our congregation, his heart for church planting, and his heart is to not stop with this church. His heart is to see other leaders raised up and other churches planted. But also the other part that you and I we talked about was his desire to provide some form of permanency for the Haitians living in the DR, because that is incredibly challenging, and it's not even guaranteed, mind you. Back to your hope point earlier, Jen. But as we, even as a church, are asking the Lord for permanency, it was really intriguing to come alongside and to see this ministry that's just longing to create a permanent church home and a permanent school and maybe some medical care and some other things in the future that they could provide and leverage. Amanya, Ishmael's wife's background is public health and dentistry and all these other things. So the opportunities are literally endless in having gospel friendship with the Doors in the DR, which is awesome.
And just a couple other minor logistical things that did matter to us. There are places of need, as we know, all over the country, but where can Liberty congregation go that's economical for all involved?
Correct.
To maximize the support that we can give to whomever we're going to work with, as well as the cost for individuals to go.
Yep.
And so the Dominican Republic's not that difficult to get to.
It's true.
Jen and I have been there 4 or 5 times prior to this trip. It's fairly easy to get to. And the fact that Ismail is fluent in English,
very helpful,
and fluent in Creole, and probably at least 50% in Spanish, make him a pretty easy person to partner with.
Pretty good translator.
We don't have to bring our own translators. And I've been in settings, 4 or 5 hours of settings where he was translating reasonably complex, theological discussions pretty seamlessly.
He's incredibly impressive. At one point, there was a gentleman teaching a theology class to the crew that Greg was mentioning at the top of his description, and he literally dumped like 4 paragraphs in English, and he was like, "Oh wait, Ishmael's got to translate this," and he was like, "Do you need me to go back?" And Ishmael was like, "Nah, I got it," and he just moved on, and we were all like, "What? That was insane!" So he's an incredibly intelligent guy, but also just a really humble guy. I think that to me was the third thing that was the factor for me. We actually got to host him here over at CAP when he was visiting another church in the area, and his humility to say, "This isn't my ministry, this is God's ministry, and my wife and I, we're just stewards of this, and we need other churches to come alongside of us and help." There's an immense amount of humility, but also training and wisdom in him. That's awesome. So let's actually kind of like get a little bit more practical. So we know who Ismail and Amanya are now. What is the update about Liberty sending trips to the Dominican Republic to continue on this relationship with him?
But we began discussions really in the first quarter of this year as to what would work best for Ismail, what would be most helpful.
Yep.
And those topics of teaching and mercy ministry and some family care, although he's kind of bashful to accept that, was excited to hear.
You kind of have to make him.
Yeah, was excited to hear about it nonetheless. So some times of the year started to kind of percolate as to when would be a good fit for what they have scheduled, because he does have other ministries that support him, and they do have some trips there. So August came up as a time frame. And so right now we're working around the time frame of August and beginning conversations with people that may or may not be interested in going to a trip like this, except this time would not be like our trip, which was exploratory. This trip would be a ministry trip.
Yep.
And it'd be doing those three things that we just discussed. And so that's where we're at. And I'm sort of reporting back and forth with the global missions team as plans come into view.
Yeah.
And I would think real quickly here within a week or two, a lot of those details could be firmed up. So that's the hope, to send a small group back, 6 or 7 people in maybe August, and then try to get onto a schedule of once a year. Not wouldn't necessarily have to be August. A little warm there.
I think
August.
My vote would be maybe not August.
February.
February, November. November was pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think we'll probably migrate towards some colder seasons, either winter or fall, U.S. But in the meantime, August seemed to fit most immediately, and that's where we're at.
Well, and the goal of this trip, as you mentioned, is to kind of get our first ministry team on the ground, but also to like get more people from our church exposed to this, and to even test some things. Like you've got a couple like father-son, father-daughter combinations coming on this trip, so we can even test what would it look like to bring Liberty families along to this environment, which was one of our goals as the global missions team, that this would be a place where families could serve together, because that's such a big part of who we are at Liberty. My final question for you guys is, what what's the Lowe family hoping that the Lord would do in the life of Liberty Church through a partnership like this one with Ismail and Amanya?
I think by the nature that we're going down to just to help out with Ismail and his family, just the whole family concept is what I think is very exciting. So I feel like I've done some short-term missions where you just kind of drop in and then you come back out. And you don't really have a sense of kind of that permanency. So even though trips may look different each time we go, it's the same people. It's the same family and can make those connections. So I think it's great, even thinking in the family context of kids, that if they were to go and even a couple years later, that they can see the same people and experience what the Lord is doing, in that country. So I think that's what I'm most excited about, is for people to go and especially for young families to have the experience of a different culture and a very different way of life. Yeah. And how they can be a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the power and excitement of being able to lock into one ministry, one location, this beautiful local church that all these other ministries are flowing from, and the idea of getting to send crews back and continue to build relationships with the same people over time. And I'm even thinking about the kiddos that go to that school. Like, the joy would be to go back next November and just see that they're 1 year older and they're well fed and they're being cared for and stewarded in the gospel, but they're also learning. And that excites me. And I think that's the kind of thing that excites our church overall as well, and can be a really cool spot for God to also confront some of our blind spots and our suburban mentalities in a context where they all want the same thing, but it looks very different than the context that we come to church every single Sunday.
Yeah, this is an opportunity for people at Liberty to sort of roll the clock back and just imagining visiting Liberty at the municipal building in Lemoyne. We were there. Jen and I were there. There's 20 people, maybe 30 people. I don't remember at most, trying to figure out how to start a church. And then somehow from there, they had the amazing provision of the Elks Lodge. And we went to the Elks Lodge and we set up the chairs every Sunday and then tore them down because there could be a rock and gem conference immediately after our church service or professional wrestling. You didn't know what was happening. So you just set up church brand new every Sunday. And then we moved to this building where we've been for 8 years. Well, Ismail and his church and his ministry with these pastors, and even the home that he's living in right now that he's constructing, where he has the basement level finished, but not the upper level where future teams would stay, actually. He's at the municipal building. That's where they're at. And so our church has an opportunity to come alongside Ismail and make a huge impact. And literally, we will see, Lord willing, Ismail in the Elks Lodge. And Ismail in a permanent location, and then Ismail as an empty nester. And his kids making a difference and having been homeschooled and are now on to their whatever's next for them, and could be a long partnership with him. But where they're at right now is a municipal building moment where they'll figure out, can they get to the next level of community permanence?
Oh, except there's about, 80 adults and 40 kids crammed into the municipal building. And they're scrappy and trying to figure it out. And he's just trying to develop leaders and love the people in front of him as best as he can. And he needs help to do that. And by God's grace, we think that Liberty can be a part of that, which is exciting and fun. Well, thank you, Greg and Jen, for being willing and available to go to the DR with me in November. I had a lot of fun with you guys. I watched Greg eat a lot of flan. But also, Jenna and I both had the joy of watching Greg speak Spanish to literally everyone that he could potentially encounter.
Lord be with all of them.
And
during that experience.
But I can even commend him because he helped me buy Anthony a gift. So he did some bartering for me as well. And
Excellent.
I won't tell you what for. All that to say, this has been another episode of the Liberti Stories Podcast. We're excited about what God's doing in the DR, and we look forward to what he's going to continue to do there as well.
Hasta luego.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Liberti Stories Podcast. For more information about our church, please visit us at www.libertyharrisburg.org. That's www.libertyharrisburg.org.